What's up, y'all? Happy Monday. I am just about to head out to some meetings and I'm having a coffee, and I just wanted to quickly talk to you guys about the topic of depression. It's something that I've been learning a lot about this past week, coincidentally, just on a few different podcasts I've been listening to and what I'm reading currently. And the first thing I'll say on it is the disclaimer that I always say when it comes to depression, which is I do believe it's a very powerful thing, and I do believe in the right circumstances, medication works and it's helpful. So I just want to be clear with whoever watches this or hears this, that if you're in a place where you are suffering from serious depression, that is probably one of the best options for you. The importance with going that route is taking it when necessary to kind of sort things out and then hopefully getting off it as soon as possible. Now, what I want to share with you guys is kind of how I look at it, and maybe some different questions that we can ask ourselves, and figuring out other ways of looking at it. And the goal of doing that is to not take it for how serious it really is, but to give ourselves the power of really fighting this thing. Because as soon as we go into a state where we are given this label that we are depressed, or when we hear I am depressed, that it takes away so much of our power, and it really puts us in that victim mindset where the first thing we want to do is we want to have power over this, and we want to be able to fight it. And that's kind of the goal of this conversation. It's something that I've had, that I deal with myself. I get it. I know there's levels to it and that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to say that, everyone's experience with it is very different, but there are different ways to look at it. One of the podcasts, which I posted on here, I think yesterday or the day before, that I recently watched, was with Dr. Phil on the Joe Rogan podcast. And I highly recommend you guys check it out if you're into that kind of stuff. It was really interesting to hear Dr. Phil's approach to it, and I was actually quite surprised because he mentions how he thinks medication is really one of the last resorts in terms of helping people with that, which I wouldn't really have expected to hear from him, which is kind of a way that I believed it in the past. And my whole thing with medication is there are fantastic medications out there and they really do help, but they're very dangerous, and what happens is people get hooked on them, and then it's a whole different world of problems. So that's really where my concern lies, in that if we can avoid it by any means necessary, I really think that's the best option. But it was really cool to hear him kind of say that as well, because he was someone who I would think would, first, I don't even know why I assume that, but I just feel like he would be someone who would be on that side of the fence in that case. But he's very clear in that podcast that he isn't. I also listened to, I think it was on an audiobook I listened to. It was a couple of weeks ago. It was during that 15 days of value, so I didn't post anything about it at that time, but I have been thinking about it and what this guy talks about. And I don't know if he's a psychologist or, a scientist in some sense of learning about depression and how people have depression and how they deal with it. And the interesting topic that he talks about is he was dealing with workplace depression specifically, and what he was able to figure out is that in a lot of cases depression is not a chemical imbalance in the brain, and so it's not a sense that we are broken human beings. And what he was able to figure out, and there's a ton of science that he talks about that backs this up. As you guys know, I don't typically get into the science side of things too much of it, but he's very clear with how it all works. But kind of his point about it was that a lot of people who suffer from depression, it's not about a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that's not, I'm not going to say that's not ever the case, but a lot of times that really isn't the case. And he talks about it in a sense where people become depressed when their needs are not being met. And in the case of the workplace scenario, a lot of times it's when people feel that they may not actually have a purpose in life, which is, having a purpose is a serious need that a lot of humans have and need to fulfill. And he just talks about how, when you go into this day-to-day life and people have these jobs and these 9 to 5 jobs where they're not happy with what they're doing and they're being told what to do by a boss where they're not given any responsibility or something in that sense, where it really takes away that purpose for people, and that's really when people become depressed a lot of the times. And there was some experiments that were done versus people who were given responsibilities in a company, or people who did a lot more kind of brainstorming type work, or companies where everyone had part ownership. So, it wasn't that typical tier system where you're talking to your boss and being directed by your boss. And the difference between those two types of businesses in terms of the number of people who suffered from depression was enormous. So the people who are in that kind of old school, talking to the higher ups where you have this position and you're just doing the typical 9 to 5 and you're being told what to do and you don't have a lot of responsibility, and there's not a lot of people who may feel like they don't have a lot of purpose, this is really where a lot of depression comes from. So it's nothing to do with the chemical imbalance in the brain. And what I've been learning in my online courses also ties into all of this, which is some very interesting points. And the first one of them is, there's a few questions that typically you could ask yourselves, or that people can ask themselves if they're feeling depressed. And again, if it's kind of that level where you might be able, you might have a lot more control over this than you think. I really try to look at depression in the sense of it being a feeling. When you hear someone say, I am depressed, we have to stray away from that label and saying, this is who I am, as opposed to, it's not who you are, it's a feeling that you're having. So I'm feeling depressed as opposed to I am depressed. And you also feel angry and you also feel happy. And we have a lot of different feelings. We have a lot of emotions. Emotions are always moving and coming and going. And if you remember the last post I talked about, where a lot of that starts in our mind with the way that we think, which leads to how we feel and our emotions, which leads to our behaviors. So I think we can take back a lot of power with how we talk about depression with ourselves, and removing the label that we give it, where, and removing that victimization that we give ourselves, where we just say, I am depressed and this is who I am. So there's a few questions I think that you can ask yourself if you are dealing with depression that, could really bring it into a different mindset. I think the first question would be that you could ask yourself is, okay, what am I doing about it? And I know on the surface, when you hear that, you say, well, it's something, this is something that I suffer from, but essentially, what are you doing about it to help yourself? I think of depression in a lot of parts about me writing that book that I wrote about the brain, and how the brain works and all that stuff. Is a lot of that comes back to proactivity. If we're dealing with depression, of course, when you're feeling depressed and you're in that time, it's very difficult, whether it's getting out of bed or having motivation. I completely appreciate that. But we really do have to be looking at things from a proactive point of, what are we doing? What are our habits on a daily basis that are making us stronger and feeling healthier and happier, that prevent these times from occurring? So if you're dealing with it, if you're feeling with it, the first question is, okay, what am I doing about it? Can I be sleeping better? Can I be eating better? The 9 fundamentals. Am I exercising? All this stuff. Ways that we can really start to work on transforming it. So first thing is, okay, this is a problem. Now let's start dealing with it. So what can I do to fix the problem? The second question that you can ask yourself is, what is my current life situation like? Because there's a good chance with a lot of people who are feeling depressed, it's rightfully so. Maybe you are just at a bad point in your life, which we all go through, and we all have these times where maybe it's completely understandable that you're feeling depressed. What's going on in your life that you're feeling this way, and what needs to change? Perhaps someone lost their job, they lost a loved one, they broke up, they got in a fight in their relationship, they did something, whatever. There's so many different things that we do go through, these different seasons in our lives where life is a battle a lot of times, and there's a lot of things that we fight. Could be health circumstances. So simply just saying, yes, okay, I'm depressed, but rightfully so, in the sense where, it would be weird not to be depressed during this time if I just, got divorced, or if I'm dealing with a health issue or something. That, you're not, it's not a thing where you're broken, in the sense where this is a completely reasonable response to the way that you should be feeling. And now let's focus on what's going on in your life and what can we do to make changes in your life in that sense. And then the third question that you can ask yourself is, are my needs being met? Because we have a lot of needs that we want to be met, and if they're not, then it's going to lead us to feel this way as well. A big one is, do I have a purpose? Do you have a reason to get up in the morning, and are you doing something that you truly feel passionate and fulfilled to do? That's a huge one for myself. I really need to be building something and working towards something and striving and pushing myself, and that's really when I am honestly the happiest in my life, as opposed to just going through the motions of the day-to-day, because I get bored with that stuff. So it's always me growing and learning, and I really notice this feeling firsthand that this is who I really want to be, the type of person I want to be, to help me feel the way that I want to feel. So a big one is purpose. But different areas, very importantly, is a lot of people who are depressed is they don't have a lot of relationships in their life. They don't have a lot of friendships in their life. So is it, what can we do to kind of fix these different areas of life, and what needs are not being met? Is it, if you're single and you want to be with someone, you don't have a lot of friends, that, what kind of hobbies or sports or whatever it might be, can we put you in a position where you can get out and meet new people? What is my purpose? Am I happy with what I'm doing in my life? Do I have a reason to get up that I'm actually excited for getting up? Like, think about getting up on a Monday morning and going to work versus getting up in the morning on Christmas Day when you're 10 years old. And just think about how the mindset of that, obviously, every day can be like it's Christmas Day, but just having something to do that and working towards something that you want to be working on, whether it's a passion project or a hobby or your career, whatever it might be, you just need to have that thing in your life that you're really interested in. And I think that asking these types of questions it can strip a lot of the power away from how we look at depression, in the sense where, oh, okay, I'm feeling depressed. Well, okay, now it's game over. Well, absolutely not. Of course I feel depressed, because I'm going through this in my life at this moment, and it's something that I need to change and I need to look into and address. These needs aren't being met. So, a lot of times we look at it and we feel it and we feel like we shouldn't feel this way. Well, maybe at that point in our lives we do feel that way, and it's for a very good reason. Now, this is aside from the type of depression that people who, can essentially be bedridden, and it really is a serious problem, or when it comes to thoughts on a suicidal level and that kind of stuff, then obviously that's when medication really plays a big role, and it's very powerful and very helpful. But a lot of days you hear people who are just feeling it's a different level of depression as well, where you're just feeling, I'm just not in the zone. And, even these questions that you ask yourself can work all across the board, even for people who are quite depressed, where it could have a lot to do with one of these three things. And I think we do have a lot more power to overcome these things than we think we do. And a great example of that, or a great book by Joe Dispenza, is The Placebo, or You Are the Placebo, I think it's called, where, if you're hanging around with a bunch of people who have the flu and you're thinking, I'm going to catch a flu, you're going to catch the flu. So if someone tells you you're depressed, or if I tell myself I am depressed, or, and it's this ongoing thing, of course, it's definitely going to happen. But giving yourself the power to battle back and put yourself in a position where you can fight back, because it's just so important we do our best to get out of that victim mindset, because when we feel that we're a victim, we don't have any power to make any changes, and that's the most dangerous place we can be. So we really want to be, essentially we want to be looking for ways, like kind of this conversation I'm having, of how we can give ourselves the power back, because that's really what's going to allow us to change. So there's two sides of the coin, where you look at depression and people think that it's not taken as seriously as it should be, which I do agree with in a sense. But there's also the other side of the coin of saying, okay, well, here it is now, what can we do, and what do we have power over to make a change out of this? And I think that's just as important of a conversation to be having. So anyways, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that as well. I know it's a topic that should be talked about, and it's a pretty crummy day out there today, so it's a good day to talk about it. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day. Bye.